Welcome to the Still Small Voice Within. I'm Pamela. Each week, we begin with a question, or sometimes an observation from ordinary life, explore a few things life has taught me, share a story, and see what wisdom wants to emerge along the way. Today's question is, what happens when we stop confusing fear with curiosity? At first glance, fear and curiosity can look surprisingly similar. Both ask, what does this mean? What happens next? What should I do? But over time, I've learned they're not asking from the same place. Fear asks, what fresh hell is this? How do I protect myself? What's the worst thing that could happen? Curiosity says, that's interesting. I wonder what's underneath that. Same event, very different interpretation and response. I've known for a long time that fear is not the enemy. Fear is trying to protect us. It's a deeply ingrained survival instinct meant to keep us safe. The problem is that fear tends to assume. If something is uncertain, it assumes it is dangerous. If someone behaves unexpectedly, it assumes something's wrong. If I can't control the outcome, it assumes I should prepare for disaster. It's all good to recognize these qualities. The problem is, I thought I was helpless to change them. I didn't know I could interrupt the program. I didn't know it could be managed. Now, fear isn't evil, but it can become exhausting because if fear is in charge, every uncertainty becomes a threat. Another thing I've noticed is that curiosity creates space. Curiosity doesn't deny difficulty. It simply pauses before reaching a conclusion. Curiosity helps us reframe the story in our minds so we can think more clearly. Curiosity asks questions like, what else could be true? What information am I missing? Am I reacting to this moment or to an old story? Curiosity doesn't guarantee comfort, but it often creates possibility. And over time, I've begun to recognize that fear predicts, curiosity observes. I've also noticed that fear likes to write endings before events have unfolded. Fear says, this relationship won't work. I'll never figure it out. I'll never find a new job. I've fallen behind. I'm stuck. Curiosity says, I don't know yet. I'm not the first one in this situation. There must be a way out, over, or through. Let's see what the data says. And honestly, that last one, those 6 words, let's see what the data says, have changed my life. Those words have taught me to dig a little deeper. And finally, I've discovered something both surprising and not obvious. Curiosity and courage are close friends. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is allowing fear to have a voice without giving it veto power. That is to say, fear doesn't get the last word in the conversation. Fear can sit in the proverbial meeting, and it should. All emotions tell us something. But we often overlook what fear is actually saying. Fear is saying, pay attention to this. But the instruction is pay attention not to act impulsively, not to manufacture an entire story before all the facts are gathered. The task is to gather data, identify exactly what the fear is, and determine whether it has merit. Until the data has been collected, there is no vote to be cast. I used to interpret every odd behavior as something is wrong. Someone pulls away, a problem. A delayed text, a problem. And because I believed something was wrong, I prepared for disaster. I thought I was being realistic, but I was actually bracing for the worst. Now I wonder how many opportunities I missed because I was looking out for one and only one outcome, the least wanted. But looking back, I realized I was frightened. And I thank myself for continuing to show up despite the fear. And because I kept showing up, even though I was afraid, eventually something slowly began to change. Instead of saying, oh no, I eventually started saying, that's curious. I wonder what's really going on. And that change was me slowly beginning to understand something important. Oh no is fear, and I wonder is curiosity. And curiosity changed the quality of my life, not because uncertainty disappeared, but because I stopped treating uncertainty as evidence of disaster. I began gathering information instead of writing a tragedy in my head. I stopped immediately believing every thought that crossed my mind and started asking, is this true? It felt weird at first to think something and then question myself, but question I did. Now, let's play the devil's advocate. Wonder if something is wrong. What can I do about it? And if I can do something about it, doesn't that change the whole story? Doesn't that give me power? And if I can't do anything about it, doesn't that still give me powers? Because I can walk away. Curiosity made it possible for me to start asking questions, to probe a little deeper. What if I don't know the whole story? What if this season is teaching me something? Wonder if fear is speaking and not reality. So what I've come to accept is I still feel fear, and I'm pretty certain that I always will. But I don't bow down before it anymore. I don't assume its predictions are true. I don't require certainty before moving forward. And perhaps that's what courage really is. Not becoming fearless, but becoming curious enough to continue. Because life is uncertain, people are imperfect, love is risky, dreams fail, and plans change. And still, we love, we begin, we trust, we hope. Yes, fear gets a voice. Yes, it has something important to say. Pay attention to this. But it doesn't get the final vote. As has become my habit, before we part, I like to leave you with a few questions. What decisions has fear been making on your behalf? What would you do if fear had a voice but not the final vote? Where are you being invited to trust yourself a little more? And what does courage look like for you today? Take these questions if they're useful. If not, that's okay too. They'll be here when you're ready and if you need them. And until next time, be well.